All right. Well, howdy, everybody. Nice to be hanging out with you today. It's Joan Gregerson here with the Green Team Academy podcast. And today's episode is a little bit different. I have enjoyed talking with folks recently. So if you've missed those other recent interviews with Renee Millard-Chacon and Tony Saladino, definitely check them out wherever you listen to podcasts or at greenteamacademy.com/podcast. And then next week, we're going to be talking with Dana Coelho and Sheila DeForest about the Colorado Environmental Film Festival, which is virtual this year. So that is super fun. And before I go on, I want to let you know that I'll be announcing the dates for the Earth Week Summit, which is probably going to be April 20th to 22nd-ish. So let you know a little bit more about that later. And then also the International Climate Action Challenge, the registration for that opens February 15th. We've got all kinds of new fun stuff in the challenge for this year, which kicks off on August 18th. All right, so got that out of the way. And what I wanted to talk with you today is about this idea of being enough. In November, December, I did these interviews with my family members. You know, we're all distributed and COVID, whatever. So I did this kind of family history series. And at the end of each interview, I asked my siblings, so what do you wish you would have known? Like, what would you have told your younger self? And all of them had pretty much the same answer, which was something along the lines of, you're okay. You're fine. In fact, you're great. So don't waste your time worrying and fretting and feeling less than. You're okay. You're already everything that you need to be. And so, maybe in your family, maybe you already got that message. But I think that each of us, regardless of how we grow up, somewhere along the way, we pick up the feeling that there's things that we need to worry about. And for me, growing up in a big Catholic family, some of my earliest memories are sitting inside of a church and seeing this big, huge statue of Jesus on the cross with blood dripping, and getting the message, wow, Jesus was like the best person that ever lived. But he died for your sins. And it's like, wait, I'm 4 years old. How did I, and like, when did this happen? It's like, oh, a couple thousand years ago. It's like, wait, I killed Jesus? Wait, how did that happen? This feeling that, just from the very early age that you're wrong, that whatever it is that you're doing has these terrible consequences. And so it's no wonder that like my brothers and sisters, that we grew up feeling guilty and worried and concerned. But I think it's something that many of us face. And when we think about, compared to animals that are living in tune with nature, a squirrel or a deer or a fish, they're just doing their squirrel thing or their fish thing, and they're already balancing all the different things that we are trying to balance. So we're trying to balance, how much time we spend with exercise and how much money we earn and our social situation. This is something with wellness coaching. We do a wellness wheel. Are you eating nutritious food? Are you getting enough exercise? How are your finances? How are your family relationships, your social, your spiritual? It's like all these things to balance. And it's no wonder that when we're going through our lives constructed as they are now, that more than one of them probably aren't in balance every day. And so being able to be okay with that and understand there's kind of this pendulum where, you might focus on really eating nutritious food and sticking very closely to that. And then maybe your social score goes down a little bit, or you focus on your social stuff and then you're not spending enough time exercising. That's totally fine. And understanding there's this pendulum where you're going to swing, you go to a more strict regimen on something, and other things might get a little bit out of balance, and then this one comes back in balance, and and all these things repeat themselves. So it's okay. We're okay wherever you are. It's okay. And so this idea of feeling that you are enough. And so I wanted to start my story of kind of how I came, the tools that I'm using, by talking a little bit about my own journey through all of this. And I would say a big part of it started in 2007, where I was recently divorced from a very amazing guy that I've been married to for 23 years. So now I'm single. I My mom, in the mix of that, had gotten very, I don't know, was stirring up trouble. So I'm like, okay, Mom, I'm not going to talk to you for a few years. So now here I am. I'm not a wife. I'm not really much of a daughter at the moment. My youngest daughter was still at home, getting ready to go off to college, and my oldest had been already in college. So, my roles were totally up in the air, and at the same time, I started reading these different people like Louise Hay about, just that the root of any problem that you're facing is probably a lack of self-love. And that was kind of an amazing perspective for me to think about. And I started in a meditation class. And and along the way, I also started going to a 12-step program. As a lot of people do, I thought I needed to get someone else in the program. And through those inquiries, they said, well, actually, we have one for you. So I started doing all this different stuff, where I started looking at how am I actually living, and where are the areas where I'm seeing the friction, and how can I get through that. So in 2007, I decided to go to Ghana in Africa for a month to do this drumming and dancing workshop. Sounds fun, right? And so, wow, to go from engineering, which was my background, to getting up in the morning, doing 1 hour of dancing, and then another hour of singing and drumming, and then repeating that in the afternoon. That was just like, I realized after being with all these introverted engineers, this was definitely a different way of being. This just putting yourself out there and being, your voice joining with other people's voices, and the whole thing of drumming and dancing together, and the drumming feeling like it's your same heartbeat. And it really, all those things just kind of like cracked me open. And at the same time, I had gone from doing engineering, which was a pretty, reasonable kind of salary, to basically no salary. and when I came back, I really had a hard time fitting in again. And so I had this kind of roller coaster of the financial stuff. And so when my finances crashed, so I kept going back to Ghana. I just loved it so much. I went 5 times from 2007 to 2009. And one of the things I realized, I remember thinking, is like, wow, I wish that everybody would lose all of their finances early in life, because you realize, like, it doesn't really matter. I was sitting there. I mean, I think that was one of the amazing things about in Ghana, is that, people really didn't care who my family was, what my degree was, what my work was. I just sat. I spent a lot of time just sitting next to people and either talking or singing or dancing or drumming. And I got this sense of myself that was outside of all the constructs that seemed so important. I remember when I was in Nigeria with some friends who were in the Peace Corps as part of these travels, and they said, when you go to the market, look for this one guy that's the butcher there. He's wearing this one like green, there's some kind of sports jersey. And I was like, well, what if he's not wearing that today? And it goes, no, he wears that every day. And so this thing of like, I had been so concerned about what clothes I had, am I looking professional enough? Am I this? Am I that? Am I whatever? And when I went to Ghana, most of those things and traveled around Africa, most of those things didn't matter. Nobody cared. And it was, people had time for me to just kind of hang out. And so through this experience, picking up all these different tools, I found a way to recognize if I was starting to get anxious, which, as I was saying earlier, is natural. Like, we're always going to be running into that anxiety thing for a minute, but you don't have to stay there. It's like the story of the two monks that had taken a vow to never touch a woman. They came up to a stream that had been recently flooded, and there was a woman who couldn't cross. So one of the monks went over, picked her up, carried her across, put her down, kept walking. The other monk was like, "You touched a woman. Oh my gosh. How did you do that? What did you do? What are you thinking? That's going to change everything." And the monk said, "Well, I only carried the woman for a minute. You're carrying her, you're continuing to carry her." And I guess that's what I'm saying, is that when we're feeling those moments of anxiety, like you'll hear people on the news, right, saying, everyone's afraid right now. Well, I'm not afraid, because I notice now that when I'm feeling fear, when I'm feeling anxiety, when I'm feeling worry, which happens all the time, that I can go, oh, that's fear. I don't need that. And I have ways to get back on track. And so the other thing, one of the people that I really enjoyed reading her work is Shakti Gawain. Her book, Creative Visualization, is amazing. But she also talks about this idea of 3 levels of having and doing and being. And a lot of our culture is talking about having, like, do you have a nice house? Do you have a good enough car? Do you have nice enough clothes? All this having. So a lot of our work is about having. Well, the next level is doing. What are you doing with your time? Are you doing something useful? Are you, should you be working? Should you be exercising? Should you be, calling your family? Like, what are the things that you're doing? But there's a deeper level, which is being. And so this is something that I learned when I started teaching, especially, is that the most powerful thing that you could do. So in 2010, I ended up in South Korea, my first job teaching English. The most powerful thing that you could do is just be there. Your students are coming with all these different things running around in their heads, and if you show up with all these things running around in your head too, then it's really hard to have an impact on that person to person. So I realized in that experience that the best thing that I could do was just be there, to be super present with every single student that I was interacting with, that I could recognize them and see them and let them know that I had seen them. And this is outside of, did you do the assignment? Are you behaving? Are you misbehaving? Whatever else was going on, was that, if I could just be there with them. And so it didn't matter. So at that same time, I was having some really crazy financial stuff happening, because I had arrived in Korea. So this is 2010, my first job. I didn't know any Korean whatsoever, so I couldn't read the Korean alphabet. I didn't know anything about Korean culture. I don't know what I was thinking, that I could just slide in. But I was taken to my apartment, which they said, most of the teachers will give you a furnished apartment. And so I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'll just show up and have a furnished apartment. Well, they said most. And so the apartment that I got after 3 days of walking around in the rain with this one guy that I don't remember what all we were doing, I guess looking at different apartments, that finally they said, okay, this is the one. Here's your apartment. There's nothing. It was an empty apartment, and I had no money, and I didn't know how to read. I didn't know where to go to shop. I had only the things that I had carried with me, and so what I remembered was like, I'm okay. This is all right. Like I'm okay in this situation, and so being in this place where you feel like a 3-year-old because you can't read, you're constantly offending people, you don't know the culture, you're just like, I was continually lost, like physically and mentally, probably spiritually. But I had these tools to come back to remind myself, like, you're okay. You can find peace in this moment, regardless of what all else is happening. And I thought, okay, well, that's cool. That's great. I really needed that. But what happened was I realized that in Korea, the level of stress is just over the top. And I was picking up on that just kind of in general with my students and how they talked about their lives. And but then I started seeing, like, reading in the paper, like 13-year-old jumps off building to kill herself because of a low test score. And I realized, wow, this 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 thing about um, being okay in the moment, this all the stuff about your identity not being linked up to what your score is, you just are. Yeah, like Nan is saying, we're human beings, not human doings. We're just that a kid that's 13 years old that just had a poor test score is not any more, she's not any less lovable, she's not any less worthy, not any less deserving of just, care and love. And if you can't give that to yourself, then you're really putting yourself at risk. And so that is why I wrote the first book, which was called Tuning In to Inner Peace. And it's really, I wrote it for people that don't feel like they're, faith-based people. They don't talk about God. They don't talk about meditation. I wanted something for people who just weren't in that realm, but they just wanted, I just wanted them to know that there's this very simple thing. If you're starting to feel anxious, you're starting to feel worried, that's totally fine, but you don't have to stay there. There's ways that you can just swing back in and feel this peaceful place immediately. And so one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is that there's been a lot of people kind of reaching out, talking about, we need money, we need this, we need that. And, that's entirely possible. I mean, I'm doing the same thing. There's things that I would like more money for, and I'm looking at grants and applying for grants. And so I'm not saying that money is good or bad, but I think using so I also love the stuff from Byron Katie, where Byron Katie has this question, like, is it true? And so anytime that you find yourself saying, we need this quickly, like, that is a really good time. I try not to use the word need, because you can go into that. Is it true? For example, when I look at my life and look at the times that I didn't have money, that I was in what would look like financial dire straits. I ended up sleeping on my niece's couch for a couple months when I came back from Korea one time. I moved back in with my mom. I moved in with my friends, slept in their basement. People think, oh gosh, that's terrible. But that during those times there was healing that was happening in a lot of cases, like moving back and staying with my mom. There was a rift there that was asking to be healed, and moving back and staying with her when I was in my 40s and in my 50s, that gave us a chance to address things that hadn't been earlier. And had I had enough money, there is no way I would have done that. I would have bought myself out of that situation. And at the same time, like when I was in Longmont and we were doing Sustainable Revolution Longmont, it was the fact that we didn't have money earlier on that got us the reservation for the Boulder County Fairgrounds, because it was the only place that didn't require a big deposit, oddly. But also then we were able to go with that and get a lot of money so that we were able to have this big, huge event that had, 1,000, 1,200 people and changed the course of the city. So what I'm saying is that whatever you think, like you think we don't need money, well, maybe you do. You think we do need money, maybe you don't. To not get too attached to just money as a means of that kind of currency. I looked up the different definition of currency, of the word, the etymology of it, and somewhere in the 1620s, the word was being in the flow. And so when we think about that, there's so many different types of currency. I was listening to a Louise Hay tape the other day about prosperity, and she's saying, there's a lot of ways to be prosperous. You can either be poor or prosperous in your time. Do you feel like you have time in the day to get whatever it is, to enjoy your life? So you could be short on time but have plenty of money. So do you have time? Are you prosperous in love, in your relationships, in creativity, in your finances? Like, there's so many different ways. And understanding that if you're working on a project, you're trying to make a big impact in your community, that if you work on relationships, you and nature, our teams are like Jeffrey in Kenya that planted 30,000 trees in 90 days. You ask him, Jeffrey, where'd you get the money? And he's like, we don't have any money. We bought seeds and we grew from seeds. We grew these seedlings, and then we went out and talked with widows and with youth in different villages. So that is an example of when you don't have money. As when I was interviewing Dan Diaz, I said, what do you do if you don't have money? And he said, money is never an obstacle to taking action for protecting the planet. It should never be an obstacle. And so if you have money, if you don't have money, if you're at a place where you don't have money, that's the time to really feel the gratitude of everything that you do have. And the fact that you can pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, we've got this idea. What do you think? And get yourself surrounded by those 100 partners, those 100 ideal partners that think your idea is a good idea. And that's going to, however you talk about it, like people say, raise your level of vibration so that people are going to want to work with you. So going from, when you feel needy, like I've done this, I probably do it every day, but especially I did it in Korea where people were so busy, and I was like determined to not just hang out with foreigners, with Americans and Canadians. I'm like, I'm gonna just spend my time with Koreans. But where I was at that moment, my friends were like, I can't talk to you. I'm studying for a test. I'm busy. I'm like, they were It's completely different than in Ghana, where people had time. So, in Korea, I, I was poor in those social kind of interactions, but at different times, I had enough money. So being able to understand that there's so many different levels of currency, and so this brings me to one of the things that, if you've ever looked at the AA Big Book, there's a section in there, page 63 or so, that talks about this idea of, it says we had a new employer, and I so so the way that I do this on a daily basis is I start the day with a simple prayer, and that it is boiled down to this: it's, I work for you. And I don't even know who I'm talking to. Some people would call this God, some would call it the universe. You call it whatever you want. I kind of think of it as the universe, because I think of it as the miracle of life on the planet, of the spiritual miracles that have happened in my life that I played a very minor role in. Things that happen to me that are just these incredible gifts. I don't know where all this is coming from, but I'm just saying to whoever that is, whatever that is, I work for you. And that is how I've kind of distilled what I learned in the 12-step programs. That in that step, they're talking about, do with me what you will, build with me, and let me step back from my small ideas and small plans and be part of your plans. And so that's how I do it. Is I don't know what all is going on, and I also know that, like, I think that the dominant culture is playing a game like maybe Risk, like the board game Risk, but I'm playing a game maybe like Twister, or I don't know what game I'm playing. But if I think that I'm playing Risk in this corporate, dominated world, this capitalistic thing, then maybe I don't look like I'm winning. So if I know that I'm working for somebody else, for something else, and that I'm a direct employee of the exact thing that I want my life to be about, then I'm okay. And so that's what I wanted to kind of say. Let me see if there was a few other things on my little list that I wanted to get to. I think I hit most of them. Yeah, so a couple things is, one is the wording. So as I was saying, anytime somebody says, "Oh man, we really need to whatever," that just like raises a little flag for me, because there's been so many things I thought I needed, and something else completely happened, and it was better. So I trust the process. I trust the universe. So thinking about those words that send a red flag. Another one is should. So somebody tells you, somebody tells me, "Hey, Joan, you really should whatever." It's like, okay, wait, you don't know about my life. And so also when we're talking to other people, using should is really not a good way to get people on your side. So when people are shoulding on you, then change it in your mind to could. I could do that. And that gives me a better, a kind of a less emotional way to process that. Another thing I wanted to mention was this idea of saying no with gusto rather than guilt. There are a lot of people like me that are people pleasers. We just want to say yes to everybody and every idea that comes our way. Oh, I can help you with that. I can help you with that. And this idea of helping and pleasing people can be like the real root of a lot of problems. There is a triangle, now I forget the name of it, but it starts with rescuing. So rescuing is the first thing that you do. You see somebody, you try to rescue them, and then it leads to resentment because they really didn't want to be rescued at all. And then you end up being mean to them because they resent you. So this thing of kind of feeling very, taking your time to feel very confident about what it is that you want to do and what your reasons, what your motivations are. So if somebody asks you, if you want to go fix somebody, that's probably not a good idea. But also if somebody asks you to do something that you're not just like really thrilled about doing, then to realize that when you say no, you have protected your passion area. You've just prevented yourself from getting distracted. And that's why I say if you can say no with gusto rather than guilt is a great place to aspire to. It's not always easy. And yeah, so that's, I think, kind of the main things that I wanted to talk about today was just making sure that you feel that you are enough already. And yes, there's a lot of interesting things that we're working on right now. Joanna Macy has some great ways to conceptualize this, but this idea that, it's like we're watching a superhero movie. Like when you watch a superhero movie and you see good versus evil and how exciting it is. Well, that's where we are right now. We're in this big, we're in this big superhero movie for the future of life on the planet, and not just for us, but for lots of other species. And so it's exciting, it's creative, but if we can stay out of feeling desperate or dire or needy, then I think that you're going to feel better and things are going to roll your way more, or at least that has been my experience. All right, so those are my 2 cents. Nan saying, I love life and life loves me. Exactly. Yeah, that any kind of thing, this idea that, the universe has your back. I work with an energy healer, and I'm always getting these really funny messages of your spirit guides are laughing because they're going, wow, this is what humans spend their time worried about. There's magic everywhere. Things can come to you from so many different ways, and that's been demonstrated every single day. I have this little practice called Miracle of the Day, where I just notice, what was the miracle, the unexpected, beautiful thing that happened today. And yeah, so the more that we can feel this kind of at home in our lives and centered in love and trusting the process, the better things are going to be. And and maybe that attracts people that give you hundreds of thousands of dollars to take your vision and move forward. Or maybe you don't get that money, and then you're forced to call a bunch of people and make a bunch of relationships. So whichever way it goes, it's going to be okay, and you're going to be okay, and you are enough. All right, so thanks so much, everybody, for hopping in today. And I really, this is something that I could go on and on about. The book Tuning Into Inner Peace has more details on this, as well as the poetry book, which is called With Open Arms, also has a lot of that too, if you're interested in more. All right, have a beautiful day, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.